بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. We begin بإذن الله عز وجل reading الأربعين في أصول الدين, the 40 in the 40 fundamentals of religion, an adapted translation of Imam Al-Ghazali, Imam Al-Ghazali's الأربعين في أصول الدين. And today we'll simply speak about the some differences, just simply to point out that it is an adapted summary, not an exact abridgment of Ihya Ulumuddin, the revival of Islamic sciences, the revival of the religious sciences. And the translator is Nasir Abdus Salam, Jazakallah khairan. And there's a foreword that we will also read, and the translator's notes. So we have, and ultimately Imam Ghazali's preface to the book. To point out, first of all, to anyone who's familiar with Ihya Ulumuddin will notice that the arrangement in Ihya Ulumuddin, that you have an introduction, you have the book of knowledge, Kitab al-Ilm, you have Qawa'id al-Aqaid, and then it moves practically into Tahara, it moves into Salah, Zakah, Sawm, Hajj. Not that these are not mentioned in the Arba'in, no, they are mentioned, but not in the first quarter, if you will. Imam Ghazali has divided the book into 4 quarters. In each of them, there are 10 chapters. Here is the same. We do have 4 quarters. In each, we have practically 10 quarters. But the difference is that the first quarter here is practically about Aqidah. It's practically about Aqidah. So he moved the Tahara, the Salah, the Sawm, Hajj. He moved it to the second quarter, if you will. So this is really a difference. So this is why it is said that it is an adapted summary and not an exact summary. And of the 10 subtitles, 10 chapters in the first quarter, practically about Islamic faith, you will find that directly 8 of them are about the essence, about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and only number 9 is about the Day of Judgment, and the 10th is about the prophecy. So this is again, it does not follow, for example, the Hadith Jibreel alayhi salam, which would include, in addition to the belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the belief in his angels, his books, the revealed books. So it's not exactly the same, but at any rate it would remain an adapted summary, and Imam Ghazali permitted this book. He said that, and we'll get to that, inshallah. That is originally part of the Jews of the Quran, Jawahir Quran, but he permitted publishing it, circulate, to get really on its own. The first part of the English rendition, really, of the translation, and it is this book was published by Turath. So those of you who are not familiar with the with Turath publishing in London, please do accustom yourself with the books that they publish. The first, the forward, the first part, is by Abdul Rahman ibn Yusuf Manjera, Jazakallah khairan. Indeed, a prominent contemporary Muslim scholar. You can listen to him speaking about Imam Al-Ghazali on YouTube if you would like to find him, immediately. So we read this forward, and we move on as much as possible, inshallah. So he said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. All praise is to Allah, Lord of the worlds, who created mankind on the natural faith, Din al-Fitra, guided them through prophets, scriptures, and signs, divinely enabled the obedient and righteous among them to choose the way of salvation, promised them His pleasure, and prepared for them the eternal gardens. May Allah send His abundant blessings and peace on His Messenger of Mercy, Nabi al-Rahmah, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and on his family and followers into limitless eternity. The human body, we are still reading Manjera's forward. The human body starts off as a limp, lifeless, and dark substance. Okay, so we talk practically about the zygote. And the three descriptions here, the three, that is a limp, lifeless, and dark substance. The existent is either animate or inanimate. And if you talk about stones, they are inanimate, lifeless. If you talk about the human being, the full grown-up human being, alive, that's exactly what we said, alive. In between, you have the, even when the sperm is still a sperm, and the ovum is still an ovum, we cannot say that they are dead matter. They are not, definitely they are not human beings, and the zygote at that moment of conception, it is to be respected, but nevertheless, the first thing, the implication of limp, simply the choice of word, of course, it's the general use of limp is different from. It could be described as limp in the sense that maybe you can say one can stretch it to mean that it cannot function on its own, but it does. Lifeless, it does have life. There is no ensoulment yet, but there is life, so it's living, and a living organism. And then he said dark substance. Here, I think it's a straightforward alternative description, it is transparent rather than dark substance. Wallah subhanahu wa ta'ala ala wa alam. But he wanted this probably uh, for the next statement, to compare it as such to the next statement, or he talks about the installment. When the soul enters this zygote, this fertilized egg, the body becomes alive and illuminated. Okay. As do the five senses. However, the soul in its initial state is also dark and without awareness. When bestowed with intellect, it too becomes bright and illuminated. Similarly, the intellect is also not complete in its illumination, sharpness, and purity until it matures. This occurs through recognition of its creator and his attributes, knowledge of the states of souls and bodies, and realizing the reality of the two worlds. A gnosis, which is achieved by means of the Quran and divine revelation. In other words, the Quran provides knowledge of the divine, which illuminates the intellect. The matured intellect then illuminates the soul, which in turn illuminates the body and gives it life. This book by the great sage and proof of Islam, Abu Hamid Muhammad Al-Tusi Al-Ghazali, died in the year 505. This is the Hijri, which is circa 1111. Details the nurturing of the ideal human being and his connection with his creator. He discusses the soul, the states of servitude, obedience and disobedience, praiseworthy and blameworthy character, illumination and purification of the heart, success and salvation, and this transient world and the eternal abode of the afterlife. Many great individuals have passed through this world, but no, not all have left their mark on Islam as Imam Al-Ghazali did. Today we speak about 2 billion Muslims approximately, and the number could really increase much more, inshallah. One should ask himself, what should be basically my message? What should be my contribution? How am I going to affect? Many people say that when I graduated, I thought I could change the world. Do attempt that, because really this is the vocation of the prophets, no matter what challenges you face. For you, it's the intention, and inshallah, you'll be rewarded for both the intention and the action. And remember that, since this is mentioned, that the narrative, there's an onslaught of disinformed and misinformed narrative about Islam, deliberate really. So much so that they talk about there was no Mecca, there was no Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They will say there is no Muhammad. Oh, how would inshallah will respond to these, for the pre-Islamic poetry is full with references to Mecca and the neighborhoods in Mecca. It's very easy to respond, but I wanted to highlight the importance of working on narrative, regardless of the profession that you choose, inshallah. Many great individuals have passed through this world, but not all have left their mark on Islam, as Imam Ghazali did. In his student days, he was fortunate to have studied under one of the greatest scholars of his time, Imam Al-Haramain, Abd al-Malik al-Juwayni, in Nishapur. This teacher recognized Imam Ghazali's outstanding intellectual gifts and used to say that Ghazali possessed encyclopedic knowledge, an ocean or a sea of knowledge. Later, the student was said to have surpassed his teacher, Imam Ghazali, He was allowed, he was permitted to teach during the time of Imam Haramain al-Juwayni, which is not a small feat really at the time. So Imam Ghazali was not only recognized as an intellectual genius, but also became one of the most influential scholars of Sufism, having achieved probably the highest academic post in the Muslim world at the time as director of the Nizamiya College in Baghdad, of course established by Nizam al-Mulk, the Wazir Nizam al-Mulk. Of course, there was a Abbasid Caliph, but there was the power, if we talk about the real political power, was in the hands of the Seljuks at the time. Imam Ghazali, spent over a decade in solitary meditation and contemplation, probably 11, doesn't really make much difference. He spent over a decade in solitary meditation and contemplation, enjoying the bliss of spiritual visions. He could have remained in this state until his death, but God had destined for him otherwise. Ghazali saw the many challenges had confronted the Muslim Ummah. He observed that the faith of many was shaken, conviction had been lost, and religious practices had been reduced to lifeless forms. Of course, one would agree with Sheikh Manjer that there's no need to speak about all details, but maybe the reason why he left Baghdad and went, to live this life of seclusion, the inner struggle that he faced in Baghdad, the two major crises, maybe simply alluding to this would have helped, and one would say that do try to read about them in Al-Muqaddim Dalal, Deliverance from Error, also translated as Freedom and Fulfillment. Now, once he realized the challenges, he says, I realized that I could easily remove their doubts. I saw myself, in fact, fully capable of exposing the hollowness and implausibility of their philosophical convictions because of my deep knowledge of these speculative sciences. I therefore felt an ardent desire to take up this work, since it appeared to be the crying need of the time. I said to myself, how does it befit you to sit in seclusion? It is an epidemic that is spreading like wildfire, and the land have themselves fallen victim to the same disease. The servants of Allah have reached the brink of destruction. He finally returned to teaching in 499, this time to the Nizamiya College in Nishapur, and took up his revival efforts, writing several enduring works. At this particular time, he returned to teaching in Nishapur at the request of Fakhr al-Mulk, son of Nizam al-Mulk, who was assassinated by the Batinites, the esoterics. And if you talk about that branch of it is the Neoplatonic, let's say, branch of that group, and they had if you talk about the Sab'iyya, the Khurramiyya, all of them with minor differences. During the days of Imam Ghazali, they resorted to a campaign of assassination, killing the Muslim political leaders and also killing scholars, so that they could have the common people, if one might say this, in terms of knowledge, readily, for their ideology, for their thoughts. So Imam Ghazali accepted the invitation of Fakhr al-Mulk. Both Imam Nizam al-Mulk and Fakhr al-Mulk later on, both were killed at the hands of the Batini. And after Nizam Mulk was, after Fakhr Mulk passed away, after he was killed, Imam Al-Ghazali stopped teaching and returned to Tus, Khurasan, and he divided his time between his students and his, the novices. So those who wanted classical fiqh, if you will, and those who wanted the revived notion of fiqh, the murids, the novices, the spiritual novices. Imam Ghazali is well known today for his literary legacy. Many of his spiritual works embody a sense of understanding and urgency that is hard to find in other works. He discusses issues in a very practical and holistic way, while all his advice and conclusions are based on their impact on the hereafter. For a person of faith, there can be no other beneficial approach, since any decision made only for this world, as most decisions are, is limited to this world and cannot include the hereafter. In contrast, a decision made with the hereafter in mind must include this world, since all pass through it to reach the next world. One of the most celebrated works of Imam Al-Ghazali is his magnum opus, Ihya Ulum al-Din, the revival of the religious sciences, Islamic sciences that is, which he wrote on his return. I would stop for a second. Did Imam Al-Ghazali write the revival of Islamic sciences on his return, or he wrote it during the 10-11 years, or did he write it at Al-Aqsa Mosque? In fact, we don't have a straightforward answer, except that when he says الرسالة القدسية في العقائد, رسالة بيت المقدس also, we know that and since he was also in seclusion, then it makes sense that he used to write during this period. And especially that we talk about 11 years of his adult life. So just think about it. He was practically still a student when Imam al-Juwayni passed away, and this leaves him practically with 15 years, maybe 16, 17 years before he passed away, rahmullah, and he left this much. So he must have written continuously, and it is written by one of his students that Imam Ghazali used to fill 4 copybooks of every night. It means from his own hifz, things that he memorized, and analyzing things and adding. So it is doubtful that he stopped writing during this period. Wallahu alam. Readers of it will discover that he aims at nothing less than nurturing a perfect slave of God, a worshipper, a servant, and a genuine human personality. He tackles each topic in a comprehensive manner, weaving through the relevant Quranic verses, prophetic narrations, anecdotes, and counsels from great sages, and employing his outstanding eloquence and psychological insight to get his points across. The arrangement would be probably, of course, the verses from the Quran and prophetic traditions, and then the companions, then the tabi'een, then ulama and ubbad and zuhad. And Imam Ghazali takes no prisoners. He takes no prisoners, and fearlessly, meaning that he would face it as in a very blunt, direct method, if you will, and fearlessly says things as they are. Scholars, traders, the ruling elite, and lay people are all addressed according to their frames of reference and relevant examples. In fact, Imam Ghazali mostly reprimands the scholars. The scholars, it means the scholars who have the knowledge did not apply it in their lives and they strayed from the right path. So they come before anybody else. And he names them, not personal names, but he names them as a classification. Ghazali appears as an expert psychologist, sociologist, theologian, philosopher, religious preacher, and spiritual guide, all in one. Just to make things a little bit more even complex, he was also an economist. In fact, there are certain parts of the Ihya that are definitely comparable to uh, Jean-Jacques Rousseau's The Social Contract. And Al-Munqidh, there are certain parts that are comparable to René Descartes in his book Meditation. Yes, absolutely. He did influence Western philosophers, he theologians like Aquinas. So he had a big impact even, and he's celebrated. This is very, very peculiar, let's say. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. You talk about conferences on Imam Al-Ghazali, like within my life. They teach Al-Ghazali everywhere, but there are international conferences from Malaysia all the way to Zaytuna. Zaytuna, I'm talking about not Zaytuna in Tunis, the Zaytuna College in Berkeley, California, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. And in between, near Chicago, they have at Elmhurst College. It's a Christian college, this one. And they have an annual Ghazali lecture. Subhanallah. The idea is that there's great impact, whether in writing or basically even on. So we mentioned Aquinas, but also Imam Ghazali influenced right rabbis also. They were influenced. I think the son of Maimonides in Cairo was influenced, but at any rate, he was translated also into Hebrew. He was translated into Latin within few years of his life. It's not really contested. His impact is not really contested. So Ghazali appears as an expert psychologist, sociologist, theologian, philosopher, religious preacher, and spiritual guide all in one. His words tugging at readers' heartstrings, beautifying their minds, and beckoning them to take up a life of piety and purify their souls before it is too late. Some of his accounts of ascetics and worshippers may appear extreme, and a number of his prescriptions may seem unattainable in the materialistic times we live in. However, they should not be arbitrarily dismissed, for they serve the important purpose of shocking people into realization. In fact, Imam Ghazali does say this, that sometimes he goes into extreme in the narrative so that it's simply sending a message. It is shocking people, awakening people, waking them from their intoxicated states and inspiring them to a life of steadfastness rather than a perilous existence on the edge of spiritual destruction. Then it is mentioned here a couple of lines of poetry that they could be of Sheikh Manjari himself, since he does not. He said, "It is the case that for a corner to be straightened, the paper has first to be folded in the opposite direction," which is true. Reverse. It's like having a U-turn on the highway. You make a mistake in choosing your path, the road. what do? You turn around. You turn around. The Ihya has been a continuous inspiration until present times and has been highly regarded by many of the author's admirers and detractors alike. Hafiz Zainuddin al-Iraqi considered it, meaning the Ihya, the foremost literary composition of Islam. Muhammad Ghazruni declared that were all Islamic sciences to be completely effaced, like from they don't exist anymore for whatever reason, he could revive them with the help of the Ihya, despite his differences with the Ghazali. The great historian and hadith master of Baghdad, Ibn al-Jawzi, acknowledged the popularity and matchless sincerity of the Ihya and wrote a summary of it, titled Minhaj al-Qasidin, Path of the Truth Seekers. Shibli Nu'mani said that every word in the Ihya possesses a magnetic effect on the reader. Ibn Taymiyyah stated that the Ihya contains many beneficial points despite his other criticism of it. And this should be a clear message. There was a book that was published more than approximately 30 years ago in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And I don't want to mention it's not my intention to simply to attack specific person, but the book was about Imam Al-Ghazali. The scholar who wrote, and he was not approving really, but he was simply mentioning, the scholar who wrote the foreword to the book mentioned that there are those in Saudi Arabia at the time, and of course even today, who declared Imam Ghazali kafir. And as I said, that scholar in the forward, he laments this position. Those today who think that they are definitely, they even claim exclusive right to Islam, exclusive narrative, a monopoly on truth. They are definitely reductionist in terms of their knowledge, unfair, biased. Uh, they they are in no position really to. They don't have the understanding. Definitely not, and especially that that the author of the book continues to mumble things on YouTube and what have you. Subhanallah. Notwithstanding this, the Ihya is a large work spanning 4 volumes with 10 detailed chapters in each. It incorporates nearly all that a person of faith needs for successful obedience in this world and salvation in the hereafter. Despite the near guaranteed effectiveness of the book, one of the obstacles in deriving benefit from it has been its length. Imam Ghazali perceived this and therefore penned a number of abridgments and adaptations of it, such as Kimya-i Sa'adat, that's the equivalent, an abridgment, but in Persian really, The Alchemy of Happiness, and Bidayat al-Hidayah, the beginning of guidance. However, it is the 40 principles, this particular book that inshallah we'll be reading, that appears to be the closest in format and theme to the Ihya. In the second section of his Jawahir al-Quran, Juz of the Quran, Imam Ghazali presented a number of Quranic verses embodying various types of knowledge and practice. He then compiled an appendix and enumerate and elaborate in detail upon the objectives contained in those verses. He named this appendix Al-Arba'in fi Usul ad-Din, the 40 principles of the religion, stating that it could stand as an independent book. In it, he covered many of the themes and subjects that are found in the Ihya, and also arranged it in 4 major parts of 10 chapters, each with an epilogue. However, it is difficult to call it a direct chapter for chapter abridgment of the Ihya, since neither the contents nor the chapter order are entirely the same. Of course, this is not the abridgment or the different lengths. One might simply point to the Al-Basit, Al-Wasit, Al-Wajiz as 3 books in jurisprudence that by design Imam Al-Ghazali wrote about fiqh Imam Al-Shafi'i. The only difference is how much he elaborated. The same thing about the Aqidah. Imam Ghazali has different lengths, deliberate by design. A partial English translation of this work was published several years ago. However, no complete translation appears to have existed. Therefore, Nasr Abdus Salam, meaning the translator here, is to be commended for undertaking the important and painstaking task of translating the entire work into English, and to Rath Publishing for acquiring it and seeing it through the various editorial phases to publication, since this is a much smaller treatise than the Ihya, containing the essence of most of what is found there. It should allow more people to access Ghazali's pearls of wisdom and inspire them to a life of divine love and obedience. Providence is from Allah alone. May He make this work a source of blessing for all, an inspiration towards common virtue, and a means of reinstilling humanity in people during these troubled times. Abdurrahman ibn Yusuf, Manjera, London, UK. 1st of Rabi' al-Awwal, December 12, 2015. Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh Manjera, Turath Publishing, the translator Nasr Abdus Salam, and of course Imam Al-Ghazali, and inshallah all our ulama throughout Islamic history. Jazakumullah anna khair jaza. And inshallah we will start tomorrow with the notes of the translator, the introduction, the translator's introduction. بإذن الله عز وجل. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.